This Future Cities Africa episode is with Deacon, a creative technologist with a focus on 3D, extended reality, and Web3. We discuss the metaverse and extended reality's potential impact on cities and what an average person's day can look like. Dale, welcome. Can you give us a brief overview of your background and your role at Team Epic?
My name is Deacon, online known as Deek. My background, I studied IT at the University of Johannesburg. Then I did my master's at Stellenbosch, where I wrote a thesis on the rate of technological change, which sort of dovetails nicely with what I do at the moment. I guess I started my career as a systems analyst and a consultant in the financial industry. And then I ended up moving to digital marketing for a while. And then in 2019, I started my company, Team Epic, which focuses on virtual reality and augmented reality, particularly software development in those areas. So today I spend my time, as a studio building AR applications, VR experiences, as well as avatars. I'm still an active community organizer in the South African and the African VR and AR scene. Recently, we just launched the Africa XR report, which is very exciting for us. We've been working on it for a very long time. And I guess as an artist, I'd like to participate in festivals and get my own work out there as well. Currently focusing on like a very hyper-realistic virtual reality meditation experience.
So give us a bit more information on this Africa XR report that you've just mentioned.
We always see like these snapshot reports about how big the industry is internationally, but there's very, very little information going on and analyzing Africa and South Africa in particular. So myself and some other organizers, we pulled together, thought about how best to accomplish this. So we created a survey to try and find out, who are the people that are actually working in this industry already in Africa. What are they working on? What's their access to the internet? What's their access to hardware? That sort of thing. And then as well as the second part of the report is interviews, spotlighting some of the really interesting projects that are going on around the continent. So all in all, it ended up being a 320 odd report that we did, spanning a whole bunch of countries, multiple languages. We're very proud of it, but it ended up snowballing into a much bigger project than we originally anticipated. Like Africa is very much a part of this technology. We have some of the best VR developers in the world. We have some of the most innovative AR app developers in the world. The storytellers, 360 film. We've got workshops and we've got community is buzzing, but we don't get the PR that we might. I think part of that is because of this sort of notion that the metaverse is some sort of American or Chinese technology. But we are very much at the forefront here. And sure, there are like plenty of hills to climb still, but I think we've made a massive amount of progress in the last couple of years. And I'm very optimistic about the next couple of years. And if you want to find out more about exactly what's going on, check out the Africa XR report.
Absolutely. Listeners can download the Africa XR report on the Future Cities Africa episode page, and that will be entitled How the Metaverse Could Change the Purpose and Feel of Cities. So Dale, what exactly is the Metaverse? Why is it important? Why should people care about it?
The simple answer to what is the Metaverse is the internet, but you can walk around it and interact with it as if it were a real place. I mean, there are many different sort of explanations and different definitions that different groups are using. Like the original coining of the term metaverse was by Neil Stephenson, who wrote the book Snow Crash, and he described it as an ambient, persistent alt reality. Which is it's difficult to sort of wrap your head around exactly what that is unless you pick up the novel and get through it. Whereas the crypto facing groups think it's more about like the economic side of decentralizing platforms and websites and that sort of thing. And the augmented reality people don't really like the term because their work happens in the real world. And then you get the VR folks like myself who talk about like a spatial relationship with the internet. So I think that the metaverse being an iteration of the internet is a nice, simple straightforward way to comprehend it. As for the vision, I think this is probably something that's tackled differently by different folks because there's lots of people working on different things. But I read in David Deutsch's book, The Fabric of Reality, he talks a lot about what simulation is and what you can do in virtual reality. And he talks about, well, we always talk about what's physically possible, but in simulation, we can go much broader than that. We can do everything that's logically possible. So, there's that famous MC Escher sketch of stairs going up and down the walls and people like at different angles. And it's not physically possible, but it's logically possible. That's the space that we're playing in when it comes to virtual reality and augmented reality. We're trying to test those boundaries and explore that area.
So no, not everyone is dying to live, work and play and shop inside of a game. We hear about digital twins, virtual replicas of cities and all the benefits that can bring. But how can the metaverse change the purpose and the feel of cities?
I think with respect to cities, it's important to draw the distinction between augmented reality and virtual reality because they both impact cities in two very different ways. With regards to augmented reality, you're taking virtual elements and placing them in the real world. Now, you could think of like Iron Man's helmet that has heads-up display information that's constantly informing his decision-making processes. We can do that. We do that already with our cell phones, right? With our smartphones, we pull them up, and when we look at maps, we look at messaging. There's all these different things that we interact with the cell phone for that correlate with where we are in the real world. I think the development of AR devices, moving on into smart glasses, is very pertinent here. It's about bringing more information to the user about the context that they're in, about the environment that they're in. So I suspect that everybody in the augmented reality world is waiting for big tech companies to launch more and more smart glasses technologies because they'll basically supplement the things that we already use a smartphone to do. With respect to virtual reality, it's very different. It's not about the real world. It's the opposite. You'd probably find more people working from home, right? I mean, most of my work, I'd say 90% of my work is done from my office station, whether it's working with people in France or working with people in Germany or working with people in the States. I very much have a localized base here at home. But it varies. It'll vary from industry to industry, from social group to social group, from company to company. Everyone's going to have a different sort of strategy, so it's going to look slightly different for everybody. I think the important thing to remember is that those technologies that underlie the capabilities are going to be available for everybody. It's on the AR side, it's injecting more information about your environment to the user, and for virtual reality, it's about being able to be anywhere in the world. And I guess that's where, we've already seen this with the internet. We get our memes from America, or we get our pop music from Korea. So that's where we, and now we can sort of walk around in those spaces. Now we can sort of interact. We can go and visit like the Venice Film Festival from Johannesburg, which is where I guess the barriers start to come in, right? So language becomes a barrier. We don't see a lot of the Chinese internet because we don't speak the language. We don't see a lot of we don't interact with a lot of folks in, say, New Zealand because of the time difference. So those barriers, those traditional internet barriers, are still very much in place.
Dale, how do you think governments should get involved in these extended realities?
It's a tricky one because in IT, you talk about technology as a supporting aspect to business. Your internet connectivity enables you to do other things, or your phones enable you to do certain things. So you have to think about how virtual reality and augmented reality might enable the fulfilling of new tasks or making people more productive in certain ways. With that respect, it's important to think of, you don't want to compare apples and oranges. If Walmart is using virtual reality for training their new employees, that's very different from, say, like an artistic augmented reality venture on the other side of the world. So I think it's probably important to look into the specifics of exactly where the benefits can be found. So going beyond these standard definitions and looking at actual particular use cases will probably be very helpful. Like you mentioned earlier, there is digital twins are a really great example of exploring visualizing certain spaces. You could visualize them to help, say, investors be more optimistic about the sort of feel of a place before it's even built. Before I've been working recently with a lot of architects who like to walk their clients through the space to give them that sense of like presence and scale that you wouldn't get from a diagram.
Absolutely. What are the latest trends when it comes to metaverse strategies?
The trends vary a lot depending on which part of the world you go to, which technology you're talking about. But I think the big one that everybody's looking at recently is the hardware race, the sort of smartphone race. Everybody wants to be that iPhone sort of provider because they know that if you can have a marketplace for apps, you can make a huge amount of money just by taking 2-3% of each sale. So to be the iPhone of virtual reality or augmented reality is definitely one of those trends to keep a very close eye on, I think. With respect to software, there's a massive amount of varying trends, and it's much more of an exploratory space when it comes to software rather than saying, oh, there's a particular trend, because we're seeing a lot of funding go to cultural projects that highlight, the specific practices in a certain region, which is doing super well. Like African projects all over the show for years now have been doing really well at different festivals by highlighting what is very specific to that area. But then there's also like big games that are like international hits coming out of studios in Cape Town. So it's probably much easier to talk about the trends in hardware than it is the trends in software, because in software there's just so much going on.
Do you see any roadblocks ahead? How can this go terribly wrong? What are some of the dangers out there?
Yeah, there are lots of roadblocks and hazards along the way, I think, and some of them are even warranted too. There are privacy concerns. So, some of these companies that are leading the way with respect to these metaverse technologies don't have a very good track record in that department. So, definitely something to keep an eye on. But then, in response to that, there are watchdog organizations coming up, like the XR Safety Initiative, headed up by Kavya Perlman. So even though that is a risk and a concern, thankfully we're aware of it, and there are attempts to try and keep track of these sorts of things. The other big one is walled gardens, companies trying to monopolize virtual reality and augmented reality platforms. So to prevent interoperability with other platforms means that they force all of their users and all of their creators to double down on their ecosystem, which is, anti-competitive at its heart. But again, there's a strong open metaverse movement as well opposing these things. There are also some, I think, things that concern me quite a bit, because there are less watchdogs and less debate around it, is the social risks. We don't really know what the unintended consequences of these technologies are. We don't know if they increase or decrease inequality. We don't know if they'll be more influential than, like, on our political views than, say, a streaming service like Netflix or YouTube. It's hard to say because it's very early days, but something worth keeping an eye on. Other questions like, are there negative side effects to this escapism that virtual reality promotes? Probably, the same way that there are negative side effects to other forms of escapism, like watching TV or playing games or something like that. I think, sort of personally, the risk that I think not nearly enough people talk about is the psychological effect of enacting violence in virtual reality. It's a very specific sort of thing to be worried about, but I think sitting on a couch playing video games with a controller in your hand, a distance away from a flat screen, is very different from actually embodying what you're doing. You're enacting it. You're actually taking your body through the motions of performing whatever it is you're doing in virtual reality. And I think there's psychologically, there's something very different going on there. And the games industry is renowned for doing very gory, very, edgy stuff, because they know that it'll sell well. And traditionally that has done really well in the gaming world. And gaming is a big part of virtual reality, especially in the software scene. So when I see it like a World War II VR game, where you're in the trenches and bullets flying overhead. Sure, it's action packed, and we have like a history of enjoying movies about war and games about war. But I think virtual reality is slightly different when you're actually there. Probably more research is needed in the area, but I would definitely say that's something to keep an eye on. I think, and we definitely need to be very careful about how we do that sort of thing.
So, if some kind of metaverse vision is eventually achieved, what does an average person's day look like?
There's a tricky thing when it comes to talk about the metaverse as such. And one of those things is that at the moment today, we have this thing called augmented reality and we have this thing called virtual reality. And they're quite different things. You use different devices, different teams are working on them. But as time goes by, those two technologies overlap more and more and more and more and more and more and more. I mean, we just saw it when Meta released a headset that does virtual reality as well as augmented reality. And we're going to see that going forward more and more, right? As the devices become smaller and more compact, and as we figure out how to handle better battery life in these things, there's going to become more and more overlap. So I think it makes sense to talk about virtual reality and augmented reality as part of the metaverse, because long-term future, these are converging technologies. So with that in mind, to answer your question about what does an average person's day look like, I don't think it's going to be particularly long until those two technologies merge. I think we're already seeing that happen already. I think maybe 10, maybe 15 years down the line, those devices there might be very few differences between those devices. I think you might wake up in the morning to your smart assistant the same way you might today, right? With an Alexa or a Siri. But this time there might be a visual representation of it, So if you pop on your glasses, the same way you'd look at your phone first thing in the morning, you'd have this little, whatever character you choose, maybe a little Samuel L. Jackson sits on your bedside table and wakes you up in the morning. Or maybe it's a cutesy Pixar character. And they're sort of coaching you through your day. They're saying, hurry up, it's time. Finish your breakfast. We need to get going. So I think that these metaverse technologies also sort of complement the personal digital assistant technology. So that would probably be the first thing that you might interface with. The next one might be navigation. So if you say you jump into your Uber and you're getting a lift down the road to a meeting, the driver is following traffic signals that are prompting him, saying, okay, well, watch out for this guy. This guy seems to be changing lanes, so slow down a little bit. He's getting visual prompts, audio prompts about the world around him that are saying, just feeding him with extra information, things to help him in his ordinary day. Meanwhile, you're sitting in the passenger seat and you're scrolling through, instead of lugging around a laptop, got like a portable sort of virtual iPad, and you're flicking through the news, catching up on whatever the story of the day is. Let's say you get to your destination and you're walking towards the boardroom and you think, okay, what's on the agenda? Let me just pull that up, and you're visually keeping that up ahead of you. So instead of slouching over a phone, you're sort of just staying upright. You okay, cool, that's going to happen, and then that's coming, okay. And you go through the calendar and you get a good sense of what's going on. Maybe your device recognizes the person you're just about to say hello to, and it pulls up their LinkedIn profile and says, okay, well, this is what they've been doing recently. This is their position. Here's the agenda below. So you're well prepared. It's constantly just informing you things that might be helpful along the way. Say you need some privacy, take the thing off, set it aside, turn it off, whatever it might be. So I think the ability to deactivate these things and opt out, I think is already very up to us. I don't think anyone's going to be coerced into using these things. I think it just might be helpful if we do, but I don't think anybody will be forced or left out if they choose not to. So if you need a bit of privacy, take the thing off, set it aside for a bit. Say afterwards you have another call with somebody on the other side of the world. You can do this already. You can just pop on a headset and go and work on like an architectural drawing in virtual reality. Which kind of gives new definition to like the phrase "I'll see you there," or "Nice to meet you face to face or in person," because these things, you're with somebody, but you can't give them a high five physically, but you're very much there with them. So you could drop into like a design document or architectural visualization, or a game that's in progress, whatever it is that you happen to be working on. You're dropping into the program, into the file, working on it with somebody in real time, making changes, saving things to the cloud, and then, all right, cool, popping off, heading out. Another thing that might be interesting to see in the relatively near future would be the enmeshing of these visual heads-up technologies with wearables. So if your heart rate's a little fast and you seem to be a little stressed, maybe it's like the middle of the week and just everything seems to be like really getting on your back, you would get like a prompt saying, okay, you're having a very stressful day. And we all know from different academic papers and studies that when you're stressed out, you don't work as well, you don't make good decisions, you can rush things, you can make mistakes. So maybe an integration with these wearables might give you a literal heads up warning saying, look, you seem to be really stressed right now. Maybe it's a good idea to go home early today. And this prompt is sent off to the boss or the manager or whoever, and it would be in their best interest to approve it. So, okay, cool. Then you go for a run, and you could gamify your run by having different objectives in front of you. So like Sonic the Hedgehog runs and catches these coins or whatever, or you're doing you're running away from zombies. However you want to make this a fun, enjoyable experience rather than a tedious chore. And then I think at the end of the day, if you want to hang out with your family, again, I really like the smart glasses idea because you can just chuck them on the couch, and you can ditch them if you want to. So I'm sure no matter how involved someone is with these technologies, I'm sure there will always be times where they take the thing off and they go, okay, cool, let me just take a break. Let me hang out with my family, have a nice dinner or something, and just take a breather. Even today, we might be glued to our phones answering emails all the time, but I don't think we necessarily need those little bells and notifications going off in our visual field constantly. So we'll probably just chuck that aside every now and then. And then, I don't know, maybe just before bed, watching a funny cat meme roll around at the foot of your bed, a sort of holographic projection of whatever it is, or whatever the funny thing of the day is.
Do you have a time frame prediction for when these new technologies really start to impact the way we currently do things?
One of my favorite quotes was a William Gibson quote, another sci-fi author, who said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. I think that just sort of filters into every single technology. Sure, there will always be great leaps in technology, whether they affect all of us at the same time. I mean, it's a no-brainer that they won't affect all of us at the same time. These things sort of filter through. They end up being really expensive when they start out, but as time goes on, they become more and more accessible. So I think geography-wise, a taxi trip in South Africa in 10 years' time or 15 years' time will probably still be driven by a person. That's not to say that'll always be the case, and that's not to say that it'll be the same in like Shanghai or something. But I think these things diffuse differently.
A big thank you to Dale Deacon for this insightful conversation on how the metaverse could change the purpose and feel of cities.